Hey, I'm Jo Rioux, creator of Cats Cradle, the Golden Twine, and you're listening to True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Jo Rioux about Cats Cradle, the Golden Twine. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Jo is an author and illustrator of children's books based in the Ottawa area of Ontario. Since graduating from Sheridan College with a degree in illustration, she's illustrated young adult books, chapter books, and picture books, but her biggest passion is comic books. Her debut graphic novel, Cats Cradle, went on to win the 2013 Joe Shuster Award for Comic for Kids. She spends most of her time drawing, reading, teasing her dog, and spinning tales of magic and monsters. Last year, Jo premiered her new graphic novel, The Daughters of Ys, with writer M.T. Anderson, and with the support of First Second Books. Her new book, again from First Second Books, is entitled Cats Cradle, the Golden Twine. The story of Cats Cradle, the Golden Twine goes like this. Surrey loves monsters, studying their lore and telling stories about them for a fee, and, she hopes, one day taming them. Unfortunately, no one takes an orphan street urchin who travels with a merchant camp very seriously. But Surrey's self-confidence, cleverness, and ambition serve her well when a mysterious new wagon joins her camp, holding something very big, very loud, and very monstrous. And that's before Surrey runs afoul of a treacherous family with its own beastly secret, and a prince hunting the greatest monster of all. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Jo Rioux about Cats Cradle, the Golden Twine. So, Jo Rioux, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Well, thank you for having me, John.
Before we get started, I want to ask you, what's on your bedside reading table? What are you reading today?
Well, my bedside reading table has gotten many more books just in the past few days because I was at TCAF. So now it's overflowing with comics.
Oh my.
I'm reading The High Desert right now. It's a 90s black punk scene memoir. And so it's really like very different from the type of work that I do. Like I do, cute, spooky children's book, but this is like raw, realistic memoir of someone who grew up in the early 90s in the South, black and a punk in a time when that wasn't, there really weren't a lot of black punks. So gripping. So I have a very eclectic, interest in comics. Because next to that, I'm also reading Hilda by Luke Pearson. Those two things I don't think could be like more polar opposites. But Hilda is just the cutest, like most charming comic, and I'm so glad I finally had like this beautiful double volume that I picked up at TCAF.
Nice. Yeah, lots of good books there, that's for sure. And certainly one of the books that I saw was your new book, Cats Cradle, the Golden Twine. I want to talk a wee bit about that. Maybe if you could talk a wee bit about the story and what inspired you to create it.
Yeah, for sure. So my story is about a young foundling named Surrey, and she dreams of becoming a monster tamer so that she can one day be strong enough to find her real family who lives in the land of monsters. And her dream comes true when she finds a beautiful ball of golden twine in the forest. A twine that grants her great power, but also puts her in grave danger. Because little does she know, the twine's previous monstrous owners are looking for their lost treasure, and they will stop at nothing to get it back.
Oh my, that sounds very harrowing. That's for sure.
Well, I love to put some spookiness in my stories. There's usually some monsters and some adventure. Those were the types of stories I really enjoyed as a kid. Maybe because I was kind of a sheltered kid. My dad was very overprotective, so I stayed inside a lot, and I just thought about what it would be like to go on a huge adventure and be in danger. I mean, I'm sure I would have hated it, like to be in actual danger, but in stories, I could explore that, and it was so exciting.
Sure, sure. Were there any specific myths that you drew upon to create the story?
I definitely was going for a fairy tale feel. Um, I loved fairy tales growing up. We had the Brothers Grimm in their original format, so they were very dark stories. They had not been, adapted much, I don't think, for a modern audience. So they had some pretty harrowing stories in there, and I think that I was fine with that. I was welcoming that. I thought it was such a great, safe way to explore the scary things of the world. I went for a fairy tale feel in this, and I drew from a bunch of different sources for monsters. Basically, I picked whatever monsters were interesting me, and I put them into the story. And I'm always coming up with new ones.
Sure. So I want to let you know, I was reading one of your reviews, and then the author suggested that the artwork is crisp and clean, displaying manga influences. So I wanted to ask you, did you intend or did you have any manga influences that helped you with this book?
Oh, I definitely did, and especially in some of my older work. I think I used to have more of a manga influence when I was younger. It's still there in my work, but now it's more of a mix of manga and French and American comics, kind of mixed all into a style that I find I'm very comfortable with now.
It sounds very eclectic, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Good. Now, for those who don't know, this book originally was published by Kids Can Press, and you won a Schuster Award for Best Comics for Kids in 2013, so congratulations on this. But I'm curious to know, is this current version that's out today updated in any way or refreshed from the original?
Yes, it is. So I was very lucky to have been given a second chance to tell the story, because now the book is being brought out by First Second Books. And for the re-release of the book, I decided to redo the art completely. And the story is really very, very close to the original. There's only some word differences here and there, but there's also a couple of scenes that I was able to add back into the story that I had to cut out originally for page constraints. So the big difference in this new iteration is I redid the entire art, redrew the pages, redid the colors, and it's a lot closer to that original vision I had for the book.
Wow, that must have taken you a long time.
I mean, it did. It was a bit like doing the book over again from scratch, but I still used the original sketches of the pages as a guide. So people who read the original Cats Cradle, will be very, will recognize the story. It won't be this completely different story to their eyes. So.
I'm talking to some artists. They say when they first start a book to when they finish can take sometimes years, and over that period of time, their artistic style changes. Now, so I wanted to ask you, looking back at the first printing of Cats Cradle, how would you comment on your artistic style? Did you see anything change along the way?
Oh, goodness, yes.
Oh.
I mean, the 10 years has gone by since I made it. Or if you mean from the beginning of the book to when I finished the book, then no. I try to keep it. In a book, I really try to keep the style very regular and similar. I could see it maybe evolving over a series, but even then, I would try to keep the style very similar to the style that I started with. But over the past 10 years, my style has changed a lot. And that was the reason I wanted to redraw it, is because, as artists, we're always growing, hopefully. And I have gotten better in the past 10 years. And I also developed a style that is much more my own, I use my natural sketchiness a lot more. So in this iteration, you can see the pencil line, and the pencil is really part of the comic art. And I'm really glad I managed to find a way to integrate that, because I found that my sketches have a lot of vitality and it would get lost when I erased them once I had inked the comic. So I'm glad I got to keep them.
Now, speaking of tools and pencils, I was reading on your site that you decided to focus on using color-ace pencils in terracotta and black as your best tools. I wanted to ask you, how long did it take for you to hone in on these specific tools as the best ones to do your work?
Well, I first started using color-ace all the way back in 2000 actually, when I did 1 year of animation when I was fresh out of high school. I started by studying animation before deciding to go into illustration. And that's when I was introduced to these erasable colored pencils. And they stuck with me throughout my whole illustration schooling. And then beyond that, I loved color-ace pencils, but I used to really favor the blue ones. And I guess I had just gotten used to them. Eventually, I moved on to black. And then when I was experimenting with my style, and I was using black color-ace and black ink, and I thought, it would be really nice if I had just a little bit of color in there, like just on the cheeks of the characters, something to make them pop. And it was super intuitive, but I had that thought. The next day I went out and I bought a terracotta color-ace pencil, and I never looked back. It was this moment of inspiration for me to grab a terracotta color-ace pencil, and I started doing all of my sketches with terracotta, and it gives my drawings this warmth, this overall warmth to it that I absolutely love.
Good. I'm glad you're able to find your tools like almost at the outset, because I know that some artists take years to find just the right tool, but it sounds like you had it like at the instant when you started creating. So that's great. So also reading on your site, it says you've dabbled in digital drawing, but you decide it's not for you. I'm wondering, is that your final decision? Do you think there might be a project in the future where you might want to use digital tools?
I'm sure there will be, because I see so many people using digital drawing, and they make beautiful work. I haven't found my tools yet that allow me to create the drawings that I want in a digital format. It would be such a time saver, frankly, if I could do everything in the computer. But there's something so nice about the traditional media that I haven't found a way to reproduce it in the computer yet.
Is it the tactile feel that you think you'd be missing, or is there something else that's lacking in digital tools?
There's that. There's the texture. Even though I've worked with textured paper in the computer, it doesn't take the digital pencil in the same way. I mean, your pencil indents the page a little bit, and that'll change it a little when you bring it in through the scanner. And one of the tools the digital tools that I use a lot, I use the Dodge tool in Photoshop. And that lightens areas that I want to be lightened, obviously. But it also gives this aura, to everything around the lightened areas. And it messes with the colors of the pencil and the paper. And for some reason, when I draw digitally, that play doesn't happen. So I really lose something.
Also, reading about you, it says you studied art at Sheridan College. So I know that a lot of people that I talk to have gone there. But I'm wondering specifically in your case, how did those studies prepare you for professional artistic work?
Well, they laid the foundations. Obviously, it's really nice to have a foundation when you're going to be working in illustration, where you learn the perspective and you practice, and there's just these basic things that I think artists should learn. But frankly, I don't think you need to go to school to learn those things. I think a lot of artists learn on their own and do fantastically. I'm glad I was able to get that schooling for the basics. As far as preparing me for the professional world, I think it really didn't. We had one course on business in the 3 years that I was there, and it barely scratched the surface of what it was like to be a freelance artist. I think they probably should have more courses relating to that, especially because if you're going to be working as a freelance artist, you're really going to have to fill different roles. You're going to have to be promoting yourself. You're going to have to be a designer and design your website. So I think I could have used more guidance in there. In the end, I had to kind of learn it on the ground, and that took longer because of that.
And I hear you also have to be your own financial consultant at some times too when it comes to tax time. That's something.
Yes. Oh no, let's not talk.
Okay, let's not go there. Okay. Well, let's get back to your book, Cats Cradle, and the fact that it's out now. I'm wondering, you mentioned that you were at TCAF, and I apologize for not being able to see you there, but it was very hectic, very busy, and lots of people.
We missed each other. Oh.
Yeah. But it was a fun opportunity to see everyone, that's for sure. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask you, how will you be promoting your book this year? In addition to TCAF, are you planning to attend any other conventions or festivals for promotion?
So far, I'm going to a small Comic-Con in Ann Arbor in the States. So that'll be in July. Other than that, I'm doing virtual events. There's going to be 2 this week. I'm going to be doing an event with the print bookstore. And I'll be in a conversation with Jake Wyatt and we're going to be talking about Cats Cradle and his book, The Well.
Ah, very good. Very good. So lots of opportunities coming up, that's for sure. Now, this, I was reading, is a trilogy. So I presume that you've got more work to be done, and that the second book will be coming up for you soon?
The third one now, and I'm going to be wrapping up some of the plot lines, but with the idea of more that could be coming.
Ah, okay. Okay, very good, very good. Well, sounds like you're going to be busy, lots of various projects on the go. So with that in mind, I'm wondering, where do you recommend that people go online to find out about your current and your future projects?
I'm especially on Instagram, and I'm working a bit more on my website now. My website is up, but I'm definitely more active on my Instagram. I'm just more likely to be updating that rather than my website. My Instagram is Jo Rioux Draws, and my website is jorioux.com.
Thanks to Jo for the chat. You can discover more about Jo on Instagram at Jo Rioux Draws. That's JORIOUXDRAWS. And online at jorioux.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel and hit the notification button. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2022.